Nice little panel here. But before we start, I've just got to, set the scene, I guess, a little bit. Got some words to share with you. So the beautiful Maribyrnong River, alive, flowing to the bay, the land of our mother, nurturing and nourishing us. Our creeks, rivers, lakes and billabongs, cleaning the country, healing us and healing in their strength. Aboriginal culture is not only a culture of the past, it is alive, dynamic and present. The well of intrinsic knowledge that comes from 80,000 years of our connection to this land is knowledge to be respected, listened to and shared. Led by our elders in residence, this panel will be a yarn to share our Aboriginal knowledges and deep cultural relationships with our water and waterways. But first, we're going to watch a short clip of Auntie Beryl Carmichael. Thanks.
Beryl Carmichael is a storyteller and elder of the Nyampa people. She was born more than 70 years ago on an Aboriginal mission that lay across the Darling River from this desert town of Menindee. Every year or so, Auntie Beryl, as she is known, gathers her grandchildren and their friends on the bank of the Darling. She shares with them their cultural history and the legends of this sacred river.
This is a story of how the Darling River was made. So a long, long time ago, when land was first created by our ancestral beings, the spirit of Emu, who was our special spirit in the sky, who created everything.
Auntie Beryl's lifelong connection to the Darling River stretches back through her ancestors, linked by a spiritual bond that was honoured through generations. This bond, she laments, was broken by the insensitivity of those who bent the great river to their will.
Poor old river. You feel, I do anyway, but I think we are spiritual people, and with my cultural knowledge, as well as being a storyteller, and all this, you can feel it screaming out for help, as well as the river gums. They're all stressed out. You only got to walk amongst them and you can feel it, they're not healthy. And one time we could go and roll our swag out under a river gum. We can't do that today because the Lynn will drop on you. That stress come to the point where we say to our kids, don't camp under a river gum, whereas it used to be our haven when we were growing up for protection and shelter. See, what the trouble is, we're overgoverned. Our rivers are overgoverned. They got all these different policies and committees, That's the only one lot of people to govern it, and that should be state water. They know when to open the gate to let the water through. Well, you got these other fellows all want to share them. So what they're really doing is disempowering us, the descendants of the First Nation from here. We're disempowered. We can't speak out and do anything. That's what I don't like about it. But I still go down and I'll bless the river and sing for the fish to come along. I'll still do all that. Yeah.
That was powerful, wasn't it? It's a great little story about the river and the importance of it and its connection to people and community. So just to give you a sort of a brief sort of overview, where we won't be doing questions and answers. Well, if we won't have answers, we're not having questions. And we're just going to, even though we've called it a yarn, because we've have to cut back on time, I'm just going to ask each of our panellists to speak and share a bit of their story and understanding of waters with us before we have to move back into the exhibition opening at about 4:45. So we'll be trying to squeeze a whole lot of information in for you in this little short amount of time. If you do have really burning questions, maybe wait till after the exhibition opening and track some people down to have a further yarn. So I'd like to start off by introducing Carolyn Briggs, who is a Boonwurrung elder from Victoria, of course, and is recognised as the keeper of the history and the genealogies of her people. So can you have a little share of your story with the mob here, please?
It's not a little one.
No, okay.
But it is about the role of water and the water use. Water meaning water conservation and the impact of colonisation of water as a resource, as a life giver. So a little bit of understanding, introducing myself. I've got little notes here. And they're one of the most important cultural practices that I've learnt when I was young was the importance of explaining where you're from, who's your family. Wherever I've travelled around Victoria or Australia, the cultural practice remains and very much an important reminder of families' history and culture. So I'd like to share my family and the cultural experience and particularly explain how that relates to our shared history and knowledge. My mother was born in 1911. Her father was a Boonwurrung and her mother was a Wamba. I have my connection with Tasmania as well. My great-grandfather, William Briggs, was born in 1861, just 25 years after the European settlement of Melbourne. We knew him as Naupa. His parents both were born during a traumatic period of the European settlement. His mother, Louisa, came from the Boonwurrung country, a place now called Melbourne, and was born sometime around the 1830s. His father came from Tasmania, a great-grandson of the great chief Manalakanna, who was born around 1820s. These relationships form a crucial part of my cultural memory. And Beryl, who you saw up there, which was a different tape that I had before, she's my first cousin. But her mother, my auntie, married a Nyampa man. And one of the parts of the cultural memory is the relationship between water and family. While my grandparents came from two different regions, their connections to water formed a crucial part of our continuing cultural connection. I have these notes. So it's those sort of things we keep talking about and the importance of, my grandmother's connection to water. My grandmother, Maggie Taylor, was born not far from Swan Hill, and both the Murray River and the Edwards River had a large, imposing impact on their lives. These rivers provided the lifeblood to their families, and the relationships with the rivers continued to play a role in their families' lives for many generations. My grandparents took opportunities to work and support their family through difficult economic and social times. But eventually they were able to purchase a small property which was on the banks of the Edwards River at a place called Moolameen, part of where I grew up on that river. The property was sustained by the river, and for many years the small property on the river sustained and protected the family as it grew and expanded. The river provided access to drinking water, supported a small garden and a growing community. The Murray cod was plentiful, and the yellow belly, and part of the Edwards River. Probably where I caught my first fish was the Murray cod. The riverbank community also accessed with the Murray perch and the wild game, kangaroo, possum and pigeons. In those post-colonial days, my family proudly gave their address as the riverbank in Moolameen. My grandfather's country was dominated by a bay, the swamps, the rivers around the coast of Melbourne. His mother Louisa was born on the coast, just south of Melbourne, in the 1830s. The Bunwurrung were a language group within the larger confederacy of the Kulin. The Kulin included the areas surrounding Melbourne, including Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo and the Goulburn River. The Eastern Kulin Nation consisted of 5 major language groups: the Bunwurrung, the Woiwurrung, the Dunwurrung, the Wadawurrung and the Jawurrung. The Wurrungs. The Wurrungs occupied the Werribee River to the Wilson's Promontory. The word Wurrung means your tongue, your language. The word Bun means not to speak with any other tongue, which translates that whenever you're going on someone else's country, you don't speak any other language. So it's about cultural protocols and respect. There are 5 clans in the estate of the Bunwurrung, and these areas we stand today is the estate of the Iluk Willam, meaning the people of the river clan. As the heart of the Bunwurrung country is the Great Bay, which once was our river, known as the Nurram. The Yarra River, which we knew as the Birrarung, means the River of Mist. The importance of water and its relationship to traditional owners is best explained through the relationships through the seasons. The Bunwurrung and the other Kulin Nation believed that there were 6 seasons, or could be 12. Each season defined the plants, animals, the stars, the moons, and the relationship between the rivers and the sea. The Bunwurrung and the Kulin used the lunar calendar, and the coming of each of the full moon was celebrated by a performance known as a Narji, not a corroboree. The 6 seasons provided the basis of the journey cycle which the Bunwurrung followed. The true summer was known as Balatho Yarani, which translates plenty of sun. The late summer was known as Wagabil Naiwin, or Old Man's Sun. As the rains arrived, the Bunwurrung started to burning parts of their land by using fire stick farming, directed by the elders preparing the land for the new regrowth. Autumn was known as Manamit, means good, as we all know is one of the most important seasons in Melbourne experiences. So we think about what the autumn is now in a Western paradigm. Winter with Purin translates no more sun. Early spring was Mayon, or the silver wattle, started to flower, the Meryong began to bud. True spring, Parith, was from September to October. It was recognised to the closeness of the constellation Turk Eliuk as the 7 sisters, or the Pleiades as we know it today. At the same time, a grand Nagi was held, and visitors arrived from the other clans of the Kulin Nation. And these were the big gatherings, what we know as what is where Government House now stands. And when somebody recorded the last witnessing of that, it was recorded as it haunted the soul forever. And each of these seasons and the journey cycle that accompanied them were defined by the relationship between the land, moon and the waters. In traditional beliefs, the importance of water and the waterway was demonstrated by Wah, the crow. Wah was the keeper and protector of the waterways. I believe it's one of the most important contributions that we can all make to begin to understand that we have a shared history. And that shared history helps define and guide the way we should protect the lands and the waters. And one way we can begin thinking about this is the shared history, to understand the way knowledge of the First Peoples of Melbourne can guide policies and programs to protect our cultural landscape. And being the chairperson, which I established the Bunurong Foundation to promote history and culture of the Bunurong, and the way we are very happy to begin these conversations is how the rich history, or that tapestry of that, is about how it's integrating in a meaningful manner. So I think these are the sorts of guiding principles that the Bunurong Foundation or the Bunurong community can also give a meaningful engagement and shared sense of history and knowledge. So at Nungudjan, it's about acknowledging that this information comes not from, we share that, but not comes from textbooks and what's out there. It's what is embedded into memories, like people like Beryl. She's 87, and she's earned that knowledge and has a long impact on changes. That history there was nothing what I had seen. So it was a whole understanding how people and rivers connect us in all of those in our lifeways. So, Nungudjan, and I'll pass you over to...
No.
No? Pass you back.
Thank you.
KJ. I can't see it.
I know,
Can't see
it's
it,
very
Dolly.
bright. Very
I
bright.
love these stage lights.
Thank you,
Kids up there in the window.
thank you, Art, for sharing that really deep, really deep knowledge and lore. You know, that it's a privilege, and I always feel blessed for when you share that knowledge with
only a
me
little
and with
smidgen.
and with this audience. So I hope everybody else feels really blessed about that. I'd next ask the wonderful Uncle Larry Walsh, who's one of our most famous storytellers and also an elder in residence here at Footscray Community Arts Centre, to tell us his little yarn about water and waterways. Thanks, Larry.
Well, thanks, KJ. Look, I'm going to paint a scene. What we see today is not the river as it was. There's just down the road a drain, which used to be a creek. That creek started from Witten Oval, underground. And it came through and went up and was the water hole where they now have the Footscray swimming pool. Note the pool that always gets flooded. They built a pool on top of a water, a clear, clean drinking water. Places where the early settlers even swam. Now let's go a little bit further up. Footscray Park. It was not the park you see today. It was just a series of rock water holes. When the water went down, the fish and the eels stayed trapped. So when the water was down, it was a good time to get fish and eels. We go a little bit further up, and there's the Ascot Vale golf range. It used to be called they thought it was a bay because it was all these little islets. It was one of the biggest bird breeding grounds along the Maribyrnong. So you got plant life, you got eggs, and birds, if you ate birds. You know, like, I haven't ate swan, but some people tell me they're okay because I'm related to swan, so I won't eat it. And there's all these places that were along, and every bend in the river in those old days had a story, had a name. It wasn't the Maribyrnong. The Maribyrnong was part of one name for the whole river, because where there was a bend, there was a story, whether it be the cockatoo story, whether it be the swan story, whether it be the kingfisher story, whether it be all these various birds, animals that lived along the riverway and that we relied on because they come down to the river and there was our source of food. Like in Victoria, a lot of people wore possum skin cloaks. This whole place was she oak, which the small possum, Tadgeree, loved. And the local Aboriginal people wore possum skin cloaks. So guess what we ate a lot of? Possums. So what you're looking at is it was the source of all the nutrients that the whole of the Aboriginal world needed. Now I'm going to take you on to a detour into the Yarra River, Birang Ma. Next time you're walking along South Bank or along Flinders Street, you get to where the Queen Street Bridge is. Go out on it and look back towards Queen Street. You see a big drain. That drain was a creek. The waterfalls were just on the other side of it. That made the Yarra fresh water, clean water, clear water. The Euros, for wanting to come up the bay, and the funny thing was, they actually built one bridge in Richmond, Morrell Street Bridge, before they straightened the river. So they planned on wrecking it. The main reason they did it was because the rivers in Europe weren't the same. They tried to make the rivers like England's rivers. And surrounding Melbourne, Footscray Road, all the way to Kensington Road, were floodplains because you had larger rivers. You had the Moonee Ponds drain, which, by the way, Moonee was the word they called the area because it was swamps. And Moonee means swamps, too many swamps to count, or a very deep pond. So they cleared the swamps because the early English realised that they got the Black Plague from mosquitoes that grew in swamps. So they cleared them in England so they couldn't get the Black Plague anymore. And when they came out here, it was so inbuilt into their memory that, oh, swamp, oh, mosquitoes, we could get disease, let's drain them. And that's what they did. Now, we still have the drains, 3 of them, all the way up to Ascot Vale, that were the main sources of feeding into the Maribyrnong River. And they are drains. They are not what they used to be, which was creek. One was called Billy Button Creek, which, by the way, there's a little section of the railway line still called Billy Button. You know that one that goes underground? If you go up West Footscray Station and walk down along the rail track, you'll see an underground rail line, which is that one over there, because it cuts through to carry all the goods in and out of Melbourne. They even covered that bit to build the railway. What we've got to do is start saying, where is the water coming from? We need to look at those sources first to protect, because if they are blocked, your river is blocked. Your river starts to dry up. We need to go all the way to the top of the Maribyrnong, to Green Gully and all them areas, and the Mount Cottrell, which again, water goes through into the mountain, feeds along underground and creates part of the Maribyrnong River. All these ones, they're not protected. They're building housing estates on them. They're building all these things on them because no science study has looked very carefully at an area. Our policies on water means the river. It doesn't mean the springs and the things that feed the river. Our policies on environment do not match with water, do not match with land, because they are interrelated. If you cover the land, and if you want a good example and you live in North Melbourne, there's a church that built in the 1800s, bluestone, that is bending that way, and every time they have to, around summer or winter, put metal things to keep it straight. What they did was, by building asphalt and everything, is they covered up what was there, which was a, what do you call it sometimes, a clay, that once you add water, it expands. So once they covered it, the water can no longer hit that clay and force that building upright. Sooner or later, they're going to have to condemn that old 18th century building because of that. So we have to learn more how we live in the means of Melbourne, and we have to connect the underground springs, the underground waterways. We can go to other countries in the Pacific. Why a little island in the middle of the Pacific is getting water coming up? Because we're looking at the top surface, the rivers that we see. We're not seeing what actually is feeding them. And the more bore water we drain, the more we block areas, the more it affects our riverways. I would love to see the restrictions they used to have in the old days along the Maribyrnong. Half of the flats, not knocking the flat people, wouldn't mind owning one, but half of those flats are actually built on what was a floodplain. And each time, because of it, they've built bigger dams further up. So they're still stopping the flow of the river to what it should be. Again, it's that thing that we're using European science alone, not mixing it with Aboriginal knowledge to make the waterways better. I'm getting phone calls from different areas now and then. For instance, I've just found out in Bunjalung country, which is up far north in New South Wales, one of their water streams that flows from the mountains has just dried up. No story has ever said that it ever was dry before, according to the Bunjalung people. No story that they can, in their records, has ever said that it's dried up. Now it has, and nobody's sure why. So it's tracing those old Aboriginal stories. And I'll tell you a meeting I went to. I think, Brendan, you might have been at it or in the phone call conversation, where some scientists from Griffith University, I think it was, went to some Aboriginal areas and they met with the Aboriginal people and they were trying to study where their water come from. And the scientist said, "Oh, did you know your water?" And the people looked at them and said, "Yeah, that's that dance we showed you." Oh. And they went to another area and they're going, "Did you know?" "Yeah, that's a song we sung you." So the Aboriginal people in a lot of areas still have the stories of where their waterways come from, how their waterways begin, and they've been ignored for 250 to 350 years. And now it's coming back to bite us in the bum. I see hope where science and Aboriginal can work together to fix that problem. But we need to push governments. Like what we had was that aunt there talking about her people know the river, but there's so many water boards, so many government interference that there's no meeting where their old stories and science can work together to fix the problem. For me, science mixed properly with some of the Aboriginal stories, we can start to trace every waterway source and go, okay, stop. You can't put something there. You can't put that dam there. You can't put that housing there because you're blocking the water sources. Our soils are so good that the water drains all the way down, hits those underground streams, hits those underground rivers that feed. Like, thank goodness we've got the football oval. Otherwise, there'd be the end of that creek. Thank goodness. No, I won't talk about the other one, the Ascot Vale drain, because there's so much housing and so many things that goes all the way to Ascot Vale, and it can no longer be fixed. But everyone doesn't know about them because all they do is they walk along and they see a drain and they go, oh, that's just a drain. No. In a lot of cases, the larger the pipe, it was the first creek they covered. Find them, repair them, and maybe we should go along the Moonee Valley, Moonee, and dig up all that concrete so that it could all turn back into the flowing water it should be, thusly feeding into the Maribyrnong, making the Maribyrnong healthy again. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Larry. He's not known as a storyteller for no reason, is he? He's beautiful. Thank you for painting landscape with words. I think that was gorgeous. And just showing, the importance of orality to traditional knowledge. Thank you so much for that. The next person who's going to speak is Brendan Kennedy in the middle here. Brendan's from up on the Murray River, Vale. He's a Waddy Waddy and Tatty Tatty man. And he's also director of Mildren, which is the Murray Lower Darling Rivers Indigenous Nations. Did I get that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. Delki Nyaganyini, good to see you. Brendan Kennedy. Dinitangi Wurunyi, I'm a river man. I always get nervous when Larry asked me about that meeting we was at. You remember that meeting, Brendan? I'm like, which one, Larry?
We've been to a
I
few.
get so nervous. It's so ironic that we're sitting here in front of a loaded camera pointed straight at us, talking about water. And back in the ancestors' times, they were on their waterways, standing in front of a loaded gun. So it's very ironic. I'm a part of Mildren, Murray Lower Darling Rivers Indigenous Nations. We've been around for about 25 years. We have statutory authority within the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, which is a Commonwealth peak body that oversees all the states within the Murray-Darling Basin. The Murray-Darling Basin starts around about the Grampians Great Dividing Range and goes all the way up into Queensland. So it's a massive depression in the landscape. It's a depression. It's where all those waters and rivers and the rains all flow down into from the mountains, and then it travels down through New South Wales, comes down into Victoria, but also continues on into South Australia and heads out to the sea at the Coorong, which is known as the bowels, the mum part of the system. So all the way through the Murray-Darling Basin is the most heavily populated of Aboriginal people within this country live within the Murray-Darling Basin. And the majority of our food is produced through the Murray-Darling Basin. So it's an important source of water for this country. Back to Mildren. Mildren, we advocate and we assert our sovereign rights for all traditional owner nations throughout the basin, Murray-Darling Basin. So we are the peak voice to the Commonwealth and all the state governments who have been exploiting all of our water resources within South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. I come from the Murray River. I have 5 rivers within my country. The Murray River, the mighty Murray River. It has many names. Every language group along the Murray has a different name for that Murray. Don't know where they got the name Murray from. He must have been.
Black.
Oh, that's another story.
No.
But in my language, the Tari people at Vale and used to, and it's called Dindi. And so I'm a Dindi and Tangi and Wurungi. I'm a Dindi, river, and Tangi, country, Wurungi, man. My European name, Brendan Kennedy, but I am taking off the European layers, decolonising. And so I think of myself within my language name to my country. Always to my water. My rivers, my river, Maribyrnong, Lachlan, Wakul River, Wa, Cool. Wa is the crow, and Cooley is the people, crow people. And the Edward River, which is called Gulachi. Gulachi, same as aunties. I pay my respect to aunties, all our aunties and all our mob, and all the mob here. This is their country. They're not the first people, they're the original people, regional. There wasn't a race here. They didn't come first in the race because it was never a race. They were the original people,
Deadly.
only people. So you've got to listen and learn from these people because we all river people, water people, same as you people, Europeans or wherever you come from. You all live near the river, near the water. It's important. We're in very worrying times now to do with water. Someone predicted, I don't know whether Larry or Auntie, years ago, there's going to be a war over water. Then there has been wars over water in other countries. You look at in the United States, the place there with the First Nations, Indians there, there's a war over them rivers there. But back here, when I was a kid growing up along the river, Vale, we used to travel over to my people's family over in Swan Hill. The bus would travel through the floodwaters. There'd be floods, and then when we get past Swan Hill, heading to Lake Bogan, to Krang, it was all underwater, and the bus would go real slow. And this is in the 70s now. I was born in the late 60s, even though I don't look that old. I keep telling myself. Anyway, but in the mid-1970s, see, before that, the farmers knew how to look after. They knew how to farm their country and make the best of what they had, whether it was through their crops or their animals, by using the water. And they had their allocations, had their licences. But during the 1970s, about 1974, the government decided, well, gee, we better start making money out of this water. And so that's what's happened. They started to commercialising water. So water allocations and licences, you now had to start paying for water. And I started to slowly see no more floods. So no more natural floods. So they started to then put more weirs and regulators and manipulate and manage, exploit and manage and restrict the flow of our water. Now, if you did that to your human body, restrict the flow of your veins. If I restricted the flow of the blood to my arm will drop off. So our land is, to us, is the same, and we call it our mother, Earth, because it is our ancestor in the landscape, and our language reflects that. So that's what's happened. They put in all these blockages of all of our veins of the landscape, where all the water runs. And so our land is dying. So the land is telling us now that you are killing us. And Auntie there, I know Auntie well, up there. She belongs to the Nyampa people, which is neighbour to my Yita people of the Lachlan River. So we're now in a crisis situation where we saw recently over the summer, we now have regular algae blooms. Now this is a common a common occurrence now. It only happened once every so often years ago. Now it's 2 or 3 times a summer. So what happens is the water is sitting stagnant. Here is a weir, let's say Mildura. Here is a weir at Euston Robinvale, and there's 120 kilometres of natural river or semi-natural river. That water is being held up, it's not flowing. It's holding all the natural purifying sediments within that water. It's been held, it's not moving. The sands aren't moving to create the sandbars, which act as those natural filters. So that's been held. The water is not clear. When Auntie was up there as a girl, that water was clear, wasn't it? See the bottom of the river. I've never seen the bottom of the river, and neither will my kids or grandkids ever again. But everyone born before me, they said, yeah, we saw that river clear. We drank out of it, crystal clear. We could see the turtles and the fish. That's really sad. Makes me want to cry. I'll never see clean, clear water again. This river was clear too. So that's what's going on, and it's not us blaming anyone. We can't, for the original peoples, Koori people, I say, we can't blame. We just want to be heard. We want to be listened to because we have, 2,000 generations of understanding and knowledge of how to live by the waterways. And by what I mean in living by the waterways, our people never camped right down on the edge of the river. They camped up the way, up the back, on the high ground. Yeah? Let the animals have access to the water, and we'll stay up the back. Because you won't catch a fish if you camp down the river. Too noisy. So we camped up along the creeks and up on the high grounds. But now all the towns are all built on the floodplains. Every town is built right next to the water's edge. And of course, before they started putting the weirs in, they were all getting flooded out in the 1950s.
Yeah, and if you think about that, Melbourne was probably, or this region was the biggest wetland in Australia. And it also relegated us as the people were forced out because of the food resources that moved people further away, and the food sources till they eradicate. If you think about places like Elwood, it was constructed by the destruction of the Red Cliffs. Now you see these wonderful houses sinking. These monuments to their lifestyle is eroding. And these are the sorts of things, if we're going to be, because I know there's an architect in the room, we're going to be needing to think about these places that we relocate our what do you call it? These people would want permanent structures, not using movement as natural processes of, we need to buy places that we can have long-term lifestyles in. But it's those sort of things that we knew when to move, when to activate the natural spring waters. Brighton had a beautiful springs, natural springs. Albert Park was a natural spring. And along the coast, you would know where the rock wells were that would elevate the waters for fresh water to drink for the early settlers. Were buying bottles of water along the beach. So that's all been closed off. Now you've got to go and buy a bottle, plastic bottle. And when I was just recently up at Wilcannia and Menindee, people found it cheaper to buy Coke than water. Because they can't drink the water up there because it's bore water, and the bore water's got so much salinity in it, it's killing the plants. So I'd like to see how people are working on that at the moment. But 3 weeks before it was released in Melbourne about what was happening on the Darling River, about a lot of the old Murray cods, which are 300 or 400 years old, dead. And I was up there at Durton, at Pooncarie, with another part of the
Pooncarie, same as your Pooncarie.
I was seeing kangaroos going a bit crazy. They couldn't jump. They couldn't move every which way. They just couldn't bound. And it was sad to see them because of what was happening in the river course. So maybe it's that blue-green algae, but it was something that was affecting our wildlife as well as our waterways.
Yeah.
What's scary too is that it's killing our water spirits. Our water spirits that we rely on. But the last thing I want to finish now.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to.
The reason why I mentioned,
Melbourne.
well, it applies here. The reason why I mentioned the Kurong is the end, the bowels, because what they're doing is they're blocking up the bowels. See, the water's meant to run out to the sea, but they're blocking it up. It's like blocking up your backside. Yeah. In some cases, what they're doing is they're actually putting water in through the wrong end of a system. Yeah, wrong end of a waterway. So that's what's happening. Think about in future living away. Don't have to have a water view. If you're thinking about living near a waterway, try and live away a little bit. You know, a few 100 metres, build a house or look to, and try and preserve and protect that precious, ancient waterway asset.
We've been given the hurry up.
Hurry up.
We've got young Sarah there. Can you give us something, just a little 5-minute thing, because there's a whole set of family and people waiting in the exhibition space. So Sarah's a Palawa woman, and maybe, we'll give you 5 minutes to sort of have your little piece. Sorry, really sorry.
That's okay.
Off you go.
First, I'd like to acknowledge my connection to Auntie Carolyn through the same Tasmanian family line and the Briggs family, and the fact that I live and work on her country, and hopefully with permission speak not about country because I don't have the right to do that, but in terms of the way that, the legacy of architecture in the way that the city has developed has always been about human interest, and it's always about ego. And so we make mistakes and then we have to fix them, and then there's a flow-on effect, and it has no consideration for anything other than the surface. It doesn't consider what's below or what's above. And the legacy, again, that we have Queen Elizabeth Street is covered up. We have the change of the Maribyrnong and the pathways that all of these rivers and waterways follow. They're all man-made. They're all constructed. Quite literally everything that is around us has been designed by someone. And so I work in architecture, as Nawi mentioned, and so there's a discomfort in working in that environment because I know I'm working in a system that is destructive. And there's going to be a period of discomfort where I have to learn that system in order to be able to subvert that system and to embed it with the protocols of the elders of those countries. And so there's living in that discomfort and sort of leaning into it because it's the only way that we can create change. There are so many opportunities, and maybe I'll try and end on a positive note. There are so many opportunities for how we can, I guess if I had to give myself an end game or a long game for my lifetime, and what I want to do is to indigenize the built environment. And that encompasses everything from buildings to landscape to the way that everybody reads the places that we live in, and actually somehow work with governments and work with all of these institutions who are hungry for this knowledge and this information, but they don't understand how to implement it and they don't value it. And so trying to figure out how we can facilitate that to be, knowledge to be valued so that it can be embedded in an appropriate way in the way that we construct our environments and deconstruct them and undo some of the damage that's been done. And, we recognise that there are so many different small shifts that we can do now. There are so many quick wins mindsets that we could change. One example would be landscape architecture and shifting from this idea of ornamental to habitat, or shifting, the concept of the fact that, we're not just designing for humans, we're also designing for eels, or we're designing for butterflies, or whatever we might be designing for, that it's not just about us, it's not just about humans, and really grasp this holistic understanding of what country is, and I'm still learning what that is, and will be learning for my entire life what that is. And to not be afraid of not knowing, but also knowing who to ask. There's so many different protocols and processes that need to be embedded in the way that we work so that we can work with country instead of against country. I think I'll leave it there.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. Thank you to this wonderful panel. Oh my God, oh, so much knowledge here. Thank you so much for sharing story and sharing who you are. It sounds like everybody really appreciated it, so thank you very much for hanging with us. Now we're going to get up and go to the exhibition space and
Share stories.
Okay, everyone
share some
move
more
your
stories with the youth. See you over there.